Heavy rhythmic thuds echoed across the desolate wasteland. With every crushing step, the shattered concrete and rusted barbed wire trembled under an overwhelming force.
Hiding beneath the rubble, 2 survivors froze in sheer terror. Wide-eyed and trembling, they couldn't comprehend what kind of monstrous entity was approaching. Before the beast could even let out a full roar, a devastating blow smashed directly into its face. A single, bone-crushing punch sent shockwaves through the air, obliterating the terrifying creature instantly. The onlookers watched in complete disbelief. Even high-ranking awakened hunters struggled to survive against orange-rank calamities. Yet this wild man was casually ripping them apart like insects, standing tall atop a towering mountain of slaughtered monsters. With glowing eyes and bare hands, the ultimate predator had arrived. After wiping out the pack of monsters, the wild man suddenly sensed movement behind him. Before the 2 terrified survivors could even blink, he disappeared in an explosive burst of speed, leaving behind nothing but a cloud of dust. Rocketing through the air like a living missile, he crashed straight toward their hiding spot with earth-shattering force. With a thunderous crash, he slammed directly down between them, obliterating the concrete and scaring both men half to death as they stared pure destruction right in the face. The sheer shockwave blew the rubble away, sending both men tumbling backward. Paralyzed by fear, they desperately begged for mercy, believing this savage monster of a man was about to tear them apart next. Hearing their screams, the warrior stopped in his tracks, utterly confused. It turned out he had simply mistaken their presence for another hidden calamity. Realizing they were just harmless humans, he casually shrugged it off, while the 2 men let out the biggest sigh of relief of their lives. The 2 survivors couldn't believe their eyes. Whispering frantically, they wondered if this wild warrior had somehow walked out alive from the legendary death trap known as the Tower. But before they could make sense of his origin, he took a calm step forward. Suddenly, the air froze. A terrifying pressure swept over the area as a massive shadow loomed right behind the warrior. Standing twice his size, a colossal horned beast with glowing red eyes bared its dripping fangs, ready to devour him whole. The onlookers lost their minds in pure horror. It was the Alpha Wolf, the supreme apex predator of the ruins. They screamed at him to run for his life, but instead of panic, a chilling, confident smirk appeared across the wild warrior's face. Crackling with violent crimson aura and lethal bloodlust, the Alpha Wolf prepared to strike, completely unaware of the true monster standing right in front of it. Unleashing a deafening roar, the Alpha Wolf gathered an insane amount of destructive energy, cloaking its massive body in violent crimson flames and crackling lightning. The searing heat and overwhelming pressure were so intense that the survivors collapsed to the ground, clutching their heads in pure agony just to stay conscious. Without giving anyone time to react, the monster fired an apocalyptic beam of concentrated fire straight down, completely vaporizing the earth beneath it. A catastrophic inferno erupted across the entire battlefield. Wave after wave of destructive explosions tore through the ground, engulfing everything in a raging sea of fire. A blinding dome of fiery destruction lit up the ruined city skyline, consuming everything in its path. As the scorching winds slowly dissipated, the 2 survivors opened their eyes in shock, unable to believe they were still alive. But the moment they looked forward, their jaws dropped in absolute disbelief. Standing directly in front of them, untouched by the flames, was the wild warrior. He had taken the entire apocalyptic blast head-on without moving an inch. While the entire landscape around them had been melted into scorched magma, the ground beneath his feet remained completely intact. Gulping in pure shock, the 2 men could barely comprehend what had just happened. Had this savage powerhouse actually shielded them from certain death? Looking up at the massive beast hovering above, an annoyed smirk appeared across his face. Calling the terrifying Alpha Wolf nothing more than a stupid mutt, he kicked off the ground with explosive power, rocketing straight into the sky to hunt his prey. As the massive Alpha Wolf landed before the terrified survivors, the warrior soared high into the sky right above it. Cocking back a fist packed with devastating force and flashing a wild grin, he commanded the beast to know its place and sit down. Diving straight from the heavens like a meteor, he unleashed a single catastrophic punch downward, tearing through the atmosphere and erupting in a blinding shockwave. With an earth-shattering crash, the apex predator's skull was violently slammed into the dirt. crushed into absolute submission in a single strike. As the warrior landed effortlessly atop the fallen beast, the onlookers could only scream in utter, mind-numbing disbelief. Landing cleanly with a confident smirk, the shockwave finally settled, revealing the massive alpha wolf crushed completely flat against the crater. Looking down from above, the two stunned survivors could barely process reality, wondering if the terrifying nightmare was finally over. Dusting himself off, the wild warrior sniffed his arms in utter disgust at the stench of monster blood. But then, a sudden thought struck him. Glancing back at the two bystanders, he called out in a deep voice, making both men snap straight to attention like terrified recruits facing their commanding officer. Surrounded by an ominous green aura and glowing eyes, the savage beast of a man slowly turned to face them. Shaking uncontrollably and sweating buckets, the poor guys braced for the absolute worst, convinced their final moments had arrived. Yet instead of tearing them apart, his terrifying aura vanished in an instant. Flashing an innocent smile, he casually dropped a single demand. "Buy me something to eat." With an innocent chuckle, he added that he'd also need a fresh change of clothes. The two survivors stood frozen in utter silence, completely dumbfounded by how quickly this terrifying powerhouse had turned into a shameless freeloader. A short while later, they arrived at a nearby local restaurant. But before the staff could even process what was happening, empty bowls and scraped clean pots were already slamming down onto the table at lightning speed. Looking at the astronomical receipt, the poor men watched their souls literally leave their bodies. He had racked up a bill of over 1 million won, devouring a staggering 120 servings all by himself. And to make matters worse, as he sat surrounded by a mountain of empty dishes with a massive bloated belly, he casually let out a burp, claiming he had actually held back out of consideration for their wallets. To add insult to injury, he shamelessly reminded them of their promise to buy him anything in exchange for saving their lives, even casually ordering ramen for dessert. While the older man screamed in pure frustration, they couldn't help but wonder about his true identity. Was he a high-ranking saint, or maybe even a saint leader? But when they asked what he was doing near the forbidden death zone, the warrior picked his teeth and dropped a total bombshell. He hadn't just been near the tower, he had literally walked right out from inside it. Before they could even process the impossibility of surviving that cursed place, the warrior shifted his attention to the younger boy. Despite looking like a completely average kid, there was a faint pulse of magical energy radiating from him. With a proud, smug grin, the older man explained that the kid was a sacred disciple, assuming this terrifying beast of a warrior was also blessed by the grace of the divine gods. Hearing the word gods only triggered the warrior's utter disgust, scoffing at the mere thought of ever serving those bastards. But as he absent-mindedly glanced at his reflection in a shiny spoon, something caught his eye, and the sight sent chills down his spine, freezing him in pure shock. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stared at the spoon's curved reflection in absolute shock. Jumping out of his seat in total panic, he frantically shouted, demanding to know where the nearest mirror was. Rushing to the sink, he slammed his hands down and immediately ripped off his shirt. Touching his face in disbelief, he stared at his reflection. Every horrific injury and permanent scar that had once ravaged his body was completely gone, leaving behind a perfectly healed, godlike physique. During his 20 agonizing years trapped inside the tower, the severe backlash of his abilities had warped him into a grotesque, monstrous savage. But now, gazing down at his fully restored left hand, he realized his body hadn't just survived the tower, it had completely regenerated back to peak form. As he looked down at the base of his palm, a strange, glowing crest suddenly caught his eye. Before he could even question it, emerald scales slithered across his skin, etching the living silhouette of a serpent into his flesh. A sudden surge of overwhelming power erupted through his veins, forcing a grimace of pain as a blinding green flash detonated right from the center of the crest. In that very moment, a mysterious system interface manifested before his eyes, declaring that he had experienced death and accomplished an impossible achievement. Decades of torment and impossible feats inside the tower were instantly converted into pure, raw experience, forging all his past abilities directly into his newly reborn body. Every trait and power he once possessed had evolved into an entirely new divine skill. With lightning crackling through the air, the the colossal phantom of the Serpent Sovereign roared to life behind him, solidifying his awakening not as a mere follower of the gods, but as the true ruler of calamity himself. As the divine surge exploded through his veins, his consciousness was violently torn away from reality, dragging him deep into the endless darkness of a spiritual realm. Awakening inside a boundless cosmic expanse filled with glowing stars, his form transformed into pure, radiant mana, cloaked in vibrant emerald flames. Suddenly, colossal jade scales shifted through the void, revealing a terrifying crimson eye glowing with ancient, primordial power. Coiling across the entire expanse of space was the true, titanic form of the Serpent Sovereign itself, staring down at the only warrior capable of commanding its catastrophic might. Deep within the boundless cosmic abyss, the warrior floated before the mythical entity. Without a single trace of hesitation or fear, he reached out toward the primordial beast, preparing to claim the supreme authority of the Serpent Sovereign for himself. The moment his palm pressed against the colossal serpent's forehead, an apocalyptic resonance shook the entire void. Blinding emerald flames and cosmic energy blazed across the galaxy, forging an unbreakable bond and engraving the serpent's divine power directly into his soul. As the cosmic vision dissolved into stardust, his consciousness violently crashed back into reality. Collapsing onto the floor and gasping for breath, he realized the overwhelming power coursing through his veins was undeniable. The legendary disaster-class hero had truly reclaimed his throne. Snapping back to his senses, the warrior sat sprawled on the floor, sweat dripping down his face. Before the bewildered onlookers could even ask if he was all right, he held up his hand and awkwardly asked if they had seen the giant snake floating in the room. Looking at him like he had completely lost his mind, the young disciple explained that, from their perspective, he had simply stripped off his shirt, dashed to the mirror, grabbed his wrist, and started screaming at thin air. Staring down at the newly etched serpent crest on his palm, the hero realized that the cosmic encounter was entirely hidden from the outside world. Suddenly, a crisp chime echoed in his ears. Snapping his head up, his eyes widened as another mysterious system prompt flashed directly into view. A divine notification rang out, declaring him the true master of Ophiuchus, the forbidden 13th constellation. In an instant, a massive zodiac magic circle blazed beneath his feet, surrounded by an overwhelming array of holographic system windows. Examining the interface, he discovered the secret behind his miraculous recovery. The skill Ultra Regeneration had completely reconstructed his body from scratch, temporarily cutting his physical stats by 50%. Unlike the other saints who relied on the favor of the gods, this system belonged entirely to him alone. With a cold, vicious smirk cutting across his face, Geon brushed off the temporary penalty. His shattered body was finally restored, and now the time had come to seek bloody vengeance against the 12 traitorous saints who left him to rot in the abyss. Memories of that fateful day flashed in his mind: the betrayal, the abyss, and the coward who stabbed him in the back while the rest fled like dogs. His purpose was now crystal clear: hunt down every single traitor who left him to rot. As an unhinged grin spread across his face, he clenched his fists, trembling with pure thrill at the sheer thought of ripping the 12 saints apart with his bare hands. Meanwhile, back at the wreckage of the disaster zone, yellow police tape cordoned off the perimeter as reporters and investigators swarmed the site. The news was already sending shockwaves across the globe. The Tower of Demons, an indestructible fortress steeped in the dark legend of Geon, had mysteriously collapsed to the ground. Speculations ran wild. Was this the work of Geon's hidden loyalists, or rival disciples looking to wipe away his memory? However, as the investigators looked down at the gruesome aftermath, pure chills ran down their spines. High-ranking sacred disciples struggled just to survive against a single orange-rank calamity, yet every monstrous beast in the area had been pulverized into the dirt like worthless insects by sheer, raw, physical force. As the investigators connected the dots, a horrifying realization began to dawn on them. Who else in the world possessed such brutal, destructive strength to obliterate orange-rank calamities with bare hands and crush the entire tower? Could it be that the legendary hero Geon had truly returned from the dead? With no definitive answers, all they could do was brace for the inevitable storm. Meanwhile, at a high-profile press conference inside a luxury high-rise, complete pandemonium broke out. Camera flashes blinded the hall as dozens of reporters frantically pushed forward, demanding answers about the tower's destruction and pressing the ultimate question: was there any chance that Geon had survived? Standing at the center of the stage, surrounded by bodyguards, was Yang Wei, the prestigious Saint of Aries. Dressed in luxury and hiding his eyes behind dark sunglasses, he maintained a cold, unreadable expression. Leaning into the microphone with an icy breath, he dropped a chilling response to the entire world. "I've got no comment." Ignoring the frantic shouts of the press, Yang Wei turned his back and stormed out of the conference hall. But the moment his luxury limousine sped away, his composed facade instantly shattered as he slammed his fist into the seat in pure, unbridled rage. Veins bulged across his forehead as that cursed name echoed relentlessly through his mind. Geon. Every single reporter had asked the exact same question all day long, driving him to the brink of insanity with the terrifying thought: could Geon truly be alive? Remembering the fearsome warrior and the grim silhouette of the Tower of Demons, Yang Wei gritted his teeth in desperate denial. Surviving 20 full years trapped inside that absolute hell was supposed to be impossible, especially when the depths of the tower were swarming with tens of thousands of legendary black-rank beasts. Clutching his pipe with trembling hands, Yang Wei desperately tried to convince himself that Geon couldn't possibly be alive. Barely escaping the tower 20 years ago with the Crimson Eye's severed head had been a miracle in itself. Back then, Geon's body was completely crippled by the backlash of his abilities, and unlike the 12 Saints, he had no divine blessings to protect him. Yet an unshakable dread began to consume his mind. What if the monster had truly clawed his way out? Exhaling a shaky breath as cold sweat poured down his neck, Yang Wei gnashed his teeth in absolute terror. If that unstoppable force of nature had actually returned from the dead, then everything they had built, their wealth, their fame, and their lives, was officially over. Meanwhile, back at the diner, Geon casually picked up a smartphone with a wicked, predatory smirk. Deciding exactly who would be first on his hit list, he dialed a familiar number. As the phone on the other end began to ring, the countdown to the Aries Saints' destruction had officially begun.